Hello everyone, this is Ryan from Little Roadie Wargaming, and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint a British 8th Army Infantry. I hope you'll find this tutorial very helpful, and I would greatly appreciate it if you helped out the channel by liking and subscribing. Now let's get started.
Okay, and let's get started. So I have here my 8th Army model. Now this is a Warlord Games 8th Army. I particularly like the range, but if you prefer something like the Perry models, that will work as well. You'll also see that I have it on a Citadel hobby holder. I found that these work really well. They work great with base size. And the reason I use holders is because if you're just handling them by the base, you're going to have your skin rubbing up against the model while you're painting it. And that friction combined with the natural oils of your skin will cause the paint to rub off while you're working. Now you can also use other things, like I will typically use a dried out or old Citadel paint pot with some blue tack for some of the metal models that don't necessarily have bases yet. Or you could use something like cork, really whatever works for you. Also, you'll see that I already have the model primed. Now I use the rattle cans from Games Workshop. This is the Zandri Dust one, but other midtones like light grays will work as well. And if you don't want to use GW, there's plenty of other primers on the market. Next up, I'm going to go over a few of the brushes that I'm going to be using. First off, I'm a huge fan of the Winsor Newtons, and as you can see, all the markings on mine are currently worn off. This is a size 1 from the Winsor Newton Series 7, and I use this for everything. If it's well taken care of, it will last you a very long time. In addition to the size 1, I am also going to be using a size 000. This is for the really small details or hard to reach areas where you're going to want a lot of control. I'm also going to be using a very, very beat up Citadel small dry brush as well. And you're going to need a brush for the shades. Now this is just your standard art store synthetic brush. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you just want long, soft bristles that are going to take in a lot of shade paint and is going to apply it evenly. And you don't have to break the bank with these. Finally, little piece of foam. As you can see, I've been using this one for a while, but this just comes out of some of the Warlord blister packs, though any sort of kind of coarse cell foam will work as well. Next off, let me go through some of the paints that I am going to be using here. There's quite a few, so just stick with me. I'm going to be using a mix of Vallejo and Citadels. So I have Vallejo Iraqi Sand, Citadel Bugmans Glow, Vallejo Khaki, Vallejo English Uniform Brown, Vallejo Stone Gray, Vallejo Black Gray, Vallejo German Camo Medium Brown, Vallejo Dark Sand, a Citadel Iron Warriors. This is one of their metallics. Also for more metallics, this is the Vallejo Brass. We're also have a few more Citadels, including the Zamesi Desert, Zandri Dust, Doombull brown. For some of their shade line, we're going to be using Citadel Seraphem Sepia, Citadel Agrax Earthshade, Citadel Coelia Greenshade, Citadel Reikland Fleshshade, Citadel Carroburg Crimson, and finally going to be using one of the Citadel dry paints, Tyrant Skull. And let's get painting. Okay, so first things first, we are going to start with the uniform. Now, I have a little bit of the Vallejo Iraqi sand on my brush. This is the Winsor Newton Series 7 size 0, and I've just watered it down a little bit on my kind of filthy wet palette back there. So we're just looking to get this onto the shorts here, avoiding any of the webbing, but if you get it on there, well, we will just be painting it over it later. You're also going to want to get the sleeves going onto the back. The collar, once again, trying to avoid the straps and avoiding where the skin's going to be. You've got the shorts continuing down here, the other sleeve, and then you're also going to want to get in and around the chest area here, up onto the collar. Now this might get a little bit messy, but this is the first paint that's going down, so you can always cover over any mistakes as you go along. So I'm going to finish this up, and we'll get back with the next step. Okay, and we're back. So, as you can tell, I wasn't exactly neat with this, and that's, like I said, because this is kind of your first color, but also when I'm painting these, I'm typically doing a large batch of them, so I will usually airbrush the Iraqi sand on. Now, those of you that have an airbrush or like using airbrushes, this is also an option, and one that I highly recommend as it's a huge time saver. Now, the next thing we're going to be doing is the skin on the model, and for this, I'm using Bugmans Glow. So we'll just get a little bit of this onto our brush here, watered down so that it goes on nice and smoothly. And these models are wearing shorts, so you're going to want to make sure that you remember that, because a lot of these World War II models, well, they're not wearing shorts. So you just got to get the legs, being careful to avoid the shorts that you already painted. You're also going to want to get the hands and the arms here. And then you're also going to want to get the face. Now, you just want to be careful getting down around the, oh, focus please, getting down around the neck so that you're avoiding going over what you already painted. And the back of the neck as well. And then you also get the back of the legs here and here. So I'm going to finish up the skin and we'll be back. Okay, so when the skin painted, we are going to be moving on to a rather small detail on this, but it is his socks. Now, there are two parts to this, and they are different. So just above the boot, you have the gaiter, and then you have their actual socks. We're just doing the socks here because the gaiter will be done later when we're using a different color. So let me get started on the socks. Now I just got a little bit of the Vallejo khaki on my brush. And And you're just going to be rather careful here. Now, one thing is these socks, because the detail on this is ridged, it will soak up a lot of paint. So you just want to carefully get around these socks here. I'll go around the top here on the skin, because that's the part that I really want to try to avoid. And once I've gone around the top, I'll just fill in the rest, because like I said, we're going to get to that gator later on to paint over it. Now I will finish this up and I'll get back with the finished socks. Okay, so the socks are complete. And the next thing we are going to be moving on to is we will be using the Vallejo English uniform. And this is to do the water bottle. And on this model, I will be also using the same color to do the hair. But in order to get that little detail right there, we will be switching brushes. But first, let's do that water bottle. So I'm just going to get a little bit of water so that I can thin out the paint on my wet palette. Now for this, you're going to want to be quite careful with this. Now, we haven't painted the straps on the water bottle yet, so of course, and I already got some on the strap. Of course, you can go over it, but the color we're going to be using for the straps is rather light. So while it will eventually cover any mistakes, it just might take you a few extra coats in order to do it. Now I'm just going to quickly clean off my brush here and switch to my Winsor & Newton 000. I just want to make sure this is quite watered down so that we can apply this finer detail on the hair. So on this model, there is a strap going through here. Now, we'll get to that later. But you just want to get right in here and paint the hair. And just kind of check to see if the model has any sideburns, as many of these British models do. This one does not. So no need to worry, it's just on the back of his helmet by the strap. So I'm going to finish off the water bottle and the hair, and I'll be back. Okay, so the water bottle and the hair is finished. I'd also like to point out that when you're doing multiple models, you can do the hair a whole variety of colors. You could use black, you could use darker browns, you could use more of a blondish colors, like the Iraqi sand would work if you wanted to repeat that as well. There's a whole wide range of human hair colors, and you can use whichever you'd like to add variation. But the next thing we're going to be painting here is the boots. Now, I'm going to be using the black gray from Vallejo, which would also make a great hair color as well. Now, the reason I'm using black gray instead of a pure black is because as we put it onto the boots here, being careful to avoid the gaiters, because it will be a lighter color going on. As we apply it to the boots, the shades will darken it, and also the shade paints will actually create definition on the boots, where you just won't get with a solid black. It's very hard to show shade on a solid black. Also, I think that the kind of grayish black shows a little bit of sun weathering as well. So we're just going to be putting this color onto both of the boots. So I will finish up the boots and I will be back. Okay, so the boots are all finished. Now, one thing to note, if you are painting a officer model, the boots or footwear that they are using are different. I don't know if it was just the time, and you can kind of see it a little bit on here, and not too well. But the British officers' footwear was brown. I don't know why. I don't know if it was a early war thing or if it continued on to the late war. If someone knows, please, by all means, put it down in the comment. I would love to hear it, but I haven't been able to find anything. Now, the next thing we're going to be doing is we are going to be doing the Enfield rifle. Now, I'm using 3 different paints for this. It's a 1:1:1 ratio of Zamesi Desert, Zandri Dust, and Doombull Brown from Citadel. This is a color match that I found that is the closest color I could get to the Enfields that I own. It's kind of a walnut. Most of them were finished with a linseed or boiled linseed oil. If you know a better walnut color, by all means, I would love to hear it. Mixing these things is a bit of a pain, but it works quite well. Now, this is the Enfield's Mark III, I believe, were the ones that were used mostly in North Africa. So we're just going to apply this to the barrel. Now, if you get over the metal parts, that's fine. We will be covering over those later, but just be careful to avoid the hands. You're also going to want to get the buttstock here, and if you can, it's going to be very hard to see on the camera, especially with this handle holder, but you can see in there is part of the stock as well. So just be careful getting in there. I'm not going to try it on camera because you probably won't see it due to the holder. But just be careful. If you do make mistakes, you can always neaten it back up with some of your other colors. So I'm just going to paint this rifle and we'll be back. Okay, rifle is all painted up. Now the next thing we are going to be painting is all the webbing. So that includes the straps, the gaiters, the sling, the gaiters, the straps, the strap on his helmet, the straps over the canteen or water bottle, the belt, the back straps, and also part of the entrenching tool here, ammo pouches. We're doing quite a lot. So for this, we are using Stone Gray from Vallejo. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is it a Stone Gray? Well, most of the webbing gear for the British Army, 8th Army included, was this kind of grayish color right out of the factory. Now, of course, it didn't stay that way. It would be weathered, or it would be treated with waterproofing material or dyes that would change the color. But it's going to be going on right now as it's factory-issued untreated webbing, and we will work a little bit of magic on it later to give it a little bit more of a weathered appearance. But there is quite a lot that we're going to be working on here. So you're going to want to be sure to get the sling. If I can get the angle right here. You're going to get both the gaiters, being careful not to get the boots or the socks. Both gaiters. You get some ammunition pouches here. Get the pistol belt underneath. Pistol belt going all the way around. You got this top part of the sheath water bottle, pistol belt along the back, straps, and chin strap for the helmet. Now, like I said, this is a lot, and for some of it, you are going to want to switch to a smaller brush, such as the Winsor Newton 000, especially to get in around that strap back here. As you can see, I'm bracing my hands on either the model's base or on the holder, just so that I can get some good control over the brush. Now, a lot of this detail will also have buckles on it. You get some of the larger buckles here. That's fine if you paint over these. We'll be going and doing the metallics of the buckle itself later on. So I'm going to do all of this, and I will get back to you when I'm finished. Okay, so as you can see, all of the slings, straps, webbing, and gaiters are done. Next thing we're going to be doing is the bayonet scabbard, as well as the bayonet handle. Now, this color that we're going to be using could also be used for the hair as well, and that color is the Vallejo German Camo Medium Brown. I've got that on my palette, so let me load up my brush here. And we're just going to be, like I said, applying it to the bayonet scabbard. Careful to avoid the stone gray. But if you get over this little end cap here, like I just did, if you could see it, avoid this. But if you get over that little cap there, that's fine. And then we are also going to be getting the handle of the bayonet as well, just like that. So I'm going to tidy those up, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so as you can see, the bayonet handle and the bayonet scabbard are done. The next thing we're going to be doing is the helmet. Now, these helmets were steel, and they were painted to match the rest of the uniform, and some slight camouflage. But it's a little bit different than the Iraqi sand that we used for the uniform. And for that, we're going to be using Dark Sand by Vallejo. I'm just going to get a little bit of this watered down on my brush. And now one of the reasons that I wait towards one of the latter steps to do this is that sometimes when you're handling the model, you'll have a tendency to touch it from the top. So if this is one of the first steps you do, you will wear some off. Now for this, you're going to want to make sure that you get all over the helmet. And you can apply this paint rather liberally. And you're going to do it in a few layers. Also remember to get back underneath the helmet as well. Now you're going to want to do it in a few layers for a few reasons. So there's a rounded area, so the paint will behave a little bit differently. If you've ever painted any Space Marines, it's similar to when you're doing some of the rounded pauldrons. It takes a few coats. Also, as you do a few coats, you'll build up the paint a little bit more, so the paint will be a little bit more protected, especially if you're using the models for gaming purposes, as you have a tendency to pick them up from above. That will get a little bit more wear and tear. And the more paint that's on there, the less, well, it'll still chip, but you'll have some of the underlayers to protect it, more than just varnishing. So I'm going to do a few layers on this, finish it off, and I'll get back. Okay, and here we have, if it wants to focus, yeah, maybe? Okay, here we have a painted steel helmet. So the next thing we're going to be working on is the kind of blued or blackened metallics, such as the blade of the bayonets, the handle, the pommel, and all of the blued or blackened metal on the rifle itself. And for this, we're going to be using the first of the metallic paints, and this is Iron Warriors by Citadel. Now, while it's not 100% necessary, I do recommend, and I do personally use, a different, cheaper quality brush. So right now I am using a small layer brush by Citadel. Like I said, not 100% necessary, but the metallic flakes in these paints will over time cause some damage to your brushes. So I personally recommend them. I do it now that I understand that that's what will happen. A little bit of trial and error there, but I'm just going to get some of this paint onto my brush. Like I said, we are going to be applying it to the blade here. Let's get that out of the way. Now it focuses better. I'm going to be getting it on the handguard, the pommel there, and then also on the muzzle of the rifle. Now these go all the way around, and unlike a lot of rifles, the Enfield does not have a fully exposed barrel. So the top of the barrel here is in fact wood, but you do have metal bandings, and I will do my best to make sure that you can see this. So you have these metal bandings here. You just want to be careful. Drag your brush in a downward motion. Try to brace your hands. And this goes all the way around the rifle. And it also goes down the other side here. Other parts of the blued, or in some case blackened steel. Now this is one of the reasons that we're using the Iron Warriors, is it's much darker metallic paint, so it has that blued look, but you can still tell that it's metallics. So we're going to continue this, applying it over the trigger guard and the magazine well here, or magazine rather here, and over the top. So on this model, it's a little difficult to see. Right by where the hand is, you have the ladder sights of the Enfield. So you gotta paint that. And you have some of the rear sights, as well as the chamber in there as well. Now this is front and back. You can kind of see in there that you have the magazine and the trigger on the inside as well. So just like painting the stock, be careful with this. If you do make mistakes, you can always go back over it. But the last other bit here is that, there it is the butt plate of the rifle. And there is a little lip right here that runs along the side that is also the butt plate, and you can get that too. So now the detail on most of these models is very, very good. So you can see a lot of these little bits here, but if you're ever unsure, you can always look up a picture of the Lee Enfield. Like I said, most of the Enfields that were used in the North Africa campaign were, I believe, the Mark IIIs. It was later upgraded to the Mark IVs, I believe from 1941 onwards is when they started to use those. So you may even have some, or model some, Mark IVs in your later 8th Army North African campaigns, and moving into Sicily and Italy as well. So I will finish up all the metal furniture here on the rifle, and we'll be back. Okay, and I'm back, and as you can see, all of the blackened or blued metal on the weapon is complete. So we have one other metallic that we are going to do, and for that we are going to be using Vallejo brass. So this is going to be just on all of the little clasps and details around, brass details around the rifle. So like on the sling, you have the kind of keepers here, and then all of the buckles on the model itself. Now, I'm not 100% sure if these were brass, but one thing I've noticed from doing a lot of wargaming modeling is the British loved their brass. And this was early on in the war, so there were different uniform standards changing. So all you're going to do is just kind of pick out these brass buckles here, and also the kind of end cap on the scabbard. Just like that. And then also under here, it's a little hard to tell, but right in there, you have the belt buckle. So I'm going to go through and pick out all the little buttons and buckles and clasps, and I'll be right back. Okay, and I've picked out all the brass around the model. And I've just kind of gone through and cleaned up any mistakes that I may have made along the way. And we are done with our metallics. So what you're going to want to do when you're done with metallics is replace the water you're using to water down your paints and clean your brushes, because some of the metallic flakes will get into the water as you clean off your brush, and they can contaminate the rest of what you're doing. So now we are going to move on to shading. And for the shade paint that's being applied to the uniform, the not the webbing, but the uniform, the rifles, the helmets, the boots, the gaiters, not the gaiters, sorry, and the socks, as well as parts of the water bottle and the scabbard here. So once again, that's a uniform, not webbing, slings, or gaiters. Anything that's stone gray is going to be different. I am using a mix of Agrax Earthshade and Seraphem Sepia, and I'm watering them down. So it's about a 1:1:1 mix. Now, one thing I have noticed recently with these Citadel shades is if you water them down too much, it will start to cause some of the medium to separate, and you can notice some kind of like, it's like a white film in some of the recesses on the models. I've just noticed this recently. Maybe it's the batch of shades that I got. If you've been encountering this, please let me know. But I've been slowly switching over to some of the Vallejo shades or inks because of it. Now, we're gonna get some of this on your brush, and you want to get enough that you can really control it, because you're gonna be trying to avoid certain things. Like anything that was stone gray. And you're just going to want to get this all over the uniform, trying to avoid any of that webbing. And if you notice that too much of it is pooling, clear your brush and kind of just move it away. Now we're looking for a pretty even shading, which is one of the reasons why I watered it down, because straight out of the bottle it can be pretty intense. So you can also go over the brass with that as well. Like I said, we're going to be doing the rifle, not the sling, and we're also going to be avoiding the skin with it too. So we can get some of the helmets here. some down here under the uniform and around the collar. Once again, being careful to avoid those straps. And then down onto the boots, but not the gaiters. And also the socks. And you can get in here on this part of the rifle too. So I am going to shade all of that, and okay, so the shade is all applied, and as you can see, it's still wet. Now, these shade paints usually take about 45 minutes to dry. And if you don't feel comfortable applying different shades in rapid succession, like I'm going to do, then you can absolutely wait the 45 minutes in between each one drying. But I'm going to push on because they're usually pretty distinct different areas that we're applying it, and some of the ones that we're going to be applying now are going to be applied very sparingly. So next thing we're going to do is all of the areas that I specifically told you not to do on the previous wash. So that is the sling, the gaiters, all of the webbings. And what we're going to use for that is a very, very diluted Coelia Greenshade. Now remember how I said earlier that all of this stone gray webbing was a factory standard issue, and that it wasn't quite had that weathered appearance yet? Well, now we're going to do it. And the reason that a lot of this webbing took on this kind of greenish appearance is the stuff that the British used for waterproofing called Blanco. Blanco was a waterproofing compound that also kind of stiffened the material up a bit, and some of it was also dyed. So it would become discolored just from the use of the waterproofing material, or some of it would quite literally be dyed. For example, the British parachute regiments were issued the factory standard kind of stone gray, and they later took it upon their own initiative to dye it more of a greenish color. And that's what we're going to do now. So you're going to want to make sure that you have just a little bit of this green shade on your brush, because you want to be very, very selective in where you apply it. And you're almost just glazing it over the areas that you need to apply it. Really trying to make sure that it doesn't pool up too much, and that you're avoiding everywhere else that's not supposed to be tinted this green. Now, it is a very, very intense color out of the bottle, so you're really going to want to water it down. Once again, being careful with what I noticed has kind of happened with Citadel with the medium separating. Like I said, I don't know if that's just me, if I got a batch that's not too great, but something to be a little cautious of. So you're going to get the pouches, you're going to get the sling, and you're going to get the gaiters here, and you're going to get all of this webbing, so the belt, the straps for the bayonet, the shoulder straps here, just being careful to really only apply it to the straps. And it is also going to go over the water bottle straps. Not the water bottle itself, but just the straps. So I'm going to go over this entire thing, just glazing it over these straps, and I will be right back. All right, so I have just kind of glazed that over all of the straps, all of the webbing, and everything that was stone gray. It's a little intense now, but it will kind of settle in a bit. And the last shade that we're going to be applying is for the skin. Now for this, I'm using Reikland Fleshshade and Carroburg Crimson, both the Citadel line. So it's about a 3 to maybe 1 ratio. And we're just using the two to kind of create this sun-kissed or slightly reddened or burnt approach look rather, of a light Caucasian skin being in the desert for prolonged periods of time. And we're also going to water it down, once again being careful to just reduce the intensity of these shades because they are quite dark right out of the bottle. So I'm going to get some of that onto my brush, and we're just going to apply it to all of the skin. Once again, just kind of glazing it on there. Everything that you painted earlier. That includes the arms, the legs, the hands, just being careful around the rifle. And you're also going to get the face, trying to avoid that strap in the back, and also carefully avoid the collar. So I'm going to finish all of this up, and we will be back when all of the shade has dried. Okay, and we're back. It's been about 45 minutes, and as you can see, there is a lot of definition on this model now that the shade has dried. So now we're going to do a little bit of weathering, mainly chipping up on the helmet here. It will certainly go through quite a bit, both in combat and just campaign situations. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that chipping effect by using our piece of sponge here and a little bit of black gray. So what we're going to do with the sponge is you just want to kind of ball it up like this so that you've got a surface to work with, and you gotta dip it in your paint and just dab off a lot of the excess. Now we're just going to press that to the helmet in a few areas, just making sure to change the rotation as we press. And there we go, we got a little bit of chipping, although I might tidy that up a little bit just by seeing if we can dab some of the excess off, because that looks a little intense. Looks like I took quite a hit to the head there. But then you got a few little other chips here. And that is the chipping. So with the chipping done, the last thing we're going to do for this model, now keep in mind at this point, you can go a lot farther with highlighting, edge highlighting. This model is just going to be tabletop standard. Can you take it much farther? Yes. Am I going to in this video? No. Though I may very well do that in other videos. For this, we're just going to give it a overall dry brush to kind of pull everything together and also lighten some areas up. So we're going to use our small dry brush from Citadel, and we're going to use the Citadel Tyrant Skull dry paint. So for this, it's, well, you're just gonna get some onto your brush here by just working it around inside the paint and making sure that you wipe off any extra. Now with these dry paints, they work pretty well. You don't need to get a whole bunch extra off. And we're just going to, working from the head down on this model, just start giving it a overall dry brush. So that's going to give it a kind of sandy looking appearance, but also a uniform appearance that's going to kind of tie and blend the whole thing together. Also, it's going to work to lighten some of the raised areas on it as well, since, well, it's a desert model. A little bit on the skin there. Now with this, you can always kind of just brush some of it off if it's a little too intense, because well, it's a very dry paint. And if you're quick, you can get it and undo any mistakes before it really kind of sets in. So I'm just going to finish doing this, and I will show you the finished model. And so here we have it, our finished 8th Army British infantry model. As you can see, it's not yet based, but that will be in another basing tutorial that I do specifically for 8th Army and desert environments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it very useful. And I would greatly appreciate it if you help out the channel by liking and subscribing. See you next time.